I'm Dr. Chris Martine. I am the David Burpee Professor in Plant Genetics and Research here at Bucknell in the Department of Biology, and I'm in my third year on campus. I am a botanist, so I study plants, but really broadly I'm really interested in evolution and ecology and reproductive biology, and the system that I explore those things in is plants. And I'm fascinated by plants, but they're also really good models for studying all sorts of different kind of biological principles. In the Martine lab, we sort of take a holistic approach to botany, and we do a lot of different things, field-based work and greenhouse-based work, and also DNA-based work. And a lot of that in the last 5 to 10 years for me has focused on an unusual group of wild eggplants that live in northern Australia. In fact, right up in here is where they live. And they do some truly unusual things in terms of how they reproduce that are not seen in other plants, and that got me interested in this particular group. And now we use all sorts of different tools to figure out how they do it, why they do it. So most flowering plants, and the flowers that you learn as a kid are flowers that we might call perfect or hermaphrodite flowers. So they have what we all learn as the pistil with the style and the stigma, and then they also have the stamen with the anther on the top. And really this is where sort of female stuff happens in the flower, and this is where the male stuff happens. And most of flowering plants on Earth are going to have both components within the flower. The unusual condition is when you sometimes get flowers that are either just male, so here's your stamen and your anther, right? And on separate plants you actually might have flowers that are just female. So there's your pistil, there's your stigma, and there's your female function. And this is kind of what people do, right? We've got separate male individuals, separate female individuals, but it's not very common in the plants. So my wild egg plants from Australia not only do this, separate male plants, separate female plants, but these females will actually make stamens, and those stamens will make pollen. But this pollen actually doesn't work. So it's still really a female flower, but it produces male stuff that is not functional in terms of reproduction. That's a really unusual thing, and it's what got me interested in these plants in particular. And what it seems to be is that this is a way to attract bees. Now I'm really showing my artistic nature here, right? Because bees won't visit these flowers unless they know they can collect pollen. Definitely one of the coolest things that has happened with our lab group in the past few years is we've been involved in discovering and naming a handful of new species. So we've named 2 new Australian species and 2 new species from the Peruvian Andes in the last 10 years. And we actually have 2 right now that we're working on that we found last year in Australia that we are now going to give names and introduce to the scientific world. So that's awfully exciting. But in the past couple of times we've gone to Australia, we've collected a lot of seeds and fruits, so we have a number of species growing here on top of the Rook Science Building that only grow in one other place in the world, and that's in the wild. So there's 3 species right here that are being grown nowhere else on Earth by anyone, and it's kind of a neat thing. It allows us to study these really unusual plants sort of in captivity. We can do a lot of cool things with them. One of the reasons we go out into the field is to make observations about plants, but also to collect material for all the different DNA projects that we do with these plants. But being out there means you often observe things you wouldn't have seen if you hadn't gone. And this is one of those cases where we were out there and I collected a bunch of scat, so the excrement of these little marsupials called rock wallabies, and we brought that stuff back and planted the seeds, and recently discovered for the first time that rock wallabies eat the fruits of this rare gardenia from northern Australia. So being out there in real places and seeing real things can end up leading to cool discoveries. Working in Australia is fantastic and challenging, and the past 2 trips I took meant spending weeks and weeks living out of a tent in the outback, and that's not easy, but it's also a lot of fun. 2 trips ago I was in the outback with Dr. Capaldi here in biology, and a student named Gemma Dugan. And one of the things we were doing in addition to collecting plants and doing plant work is we were collecting bees to try to understand the pollination biology of these plants better. And at one point on my own on a rock about 40 feet in the air, I took a fairly violent swing with a big net to try to catch a bee, and it sent me off balance, and I fell and smacked my head on a boulder. And I tore a piece of my ear almost cleanly off, and had to sort of stumble over to where Beth was to find her with blood pouring down all over my shoulder and the side of my face, and we had to go and find a clinic 45 minutes away that could stitch me back together. Luckily they could. There's a lot of questions we can't answer by looking at the plants themselves that require us to, look at sort of smaller scales, whether that's under the microscope or at the DNA of the species themselves. So in this section of the lab, we pretty much go from fresh collected leaf tissue, whether that's in the field in Australia or in the greenhouse here on campus, to actual DNA that we can extract from the plants and then look at on our computers and sort of discover evolutionary histories in the course of a week. Here's the thing about plants, they are everywhere. So everywhere you go in the world, you're going to see plants. So if you sort of learn about some of the plants of the world and who they are and how they work, it's kind of impossible to then go out into the world anywhere you go and not feel a little bit more familiar with your surroundings. So for me, that's one of the reasons I think that plants are so cool and why I want people to learn more about them and be as fascinated by them as I am. This is where discovery happens.